my name is Kelly Martin. I'm a traditionally and independently published author, and today I am so happy to have this special episode for you where I'm participating in the July edition of Wordstock. Wordstock is the brainchild of Robert from StoryDtechtive. It is a dark and stormy night here, literally. If you can hear the thunder outside, kind of adds to it. But anyway, it is the brainchild of Robert from the StoryDtechtive. His link will be in the description, and he does this every month, and I'm so honored and so excited to be here with you today to talk about story structure. Now, the cool thing about Wordstock is that Robert gives a general idea of what the topic is going to be, but we get to do whatever we want to with that topic. Since the topic is story structure, I thought that I would talk about the story structure of horror books, since that's mainly what I write. So let's get into it. This is the basic drawing of story structure. You start with the introduction, you do the rise, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. That is the same for most type of stories, no matter what, and horror falls in that category as well. There are some nuances with horror that kind of is a little bit different than other story structures, so that's kind of what I want to get into today. You can also structure your horror story like this. You can start with your prologue, which if you've seen horror movies, a lot of times they start with like some really scary scene, and then they like do the title card, and then you meet your family or you start the story. So you can start with a prologue, go down to the introduction, then do the rise, the climax, the fall in action, and the resolution. Either way you want to do it is perfectly fine for your story, but there are some beats in horror that you kind of need to hit. So let's say your story is going to start with a basic introduction part of your story. You're going to follow the basic story structure of most stories, and you're going to start with the introduction. So you introduce your characters, you introduce your locations. Some horror books, like The Woman in Black, the location is part of, it's kind of like a character. So some of your stories in horror, especially gothic horror, your location will definitely be part or kind of like a character in your story. Now, A Woman in Black has a different story structure. It starts with present day and then goes back to a flashback. You can also do that. You can change things up in your story. I know you all know that. But we're just going to talk a little bit about how the structure in horror might need to be a little different. After your introduction, after you've met your main characters and everything is hunky-dory, or supposedly hunky-dory, then you go into your rise. Now, this is where stories, I think, are different from what I would think would happen in real life. To me, if I were a ghost and a new family moved into my nice abandoned house, I would scare the heck out of them at the beginning. I would do my big finale at the beginning to get those people out of my house so I could go on about my merry afterlife. Story structure does not allow for that to happen. So that's why if you're reading a horror story, if you're watching a horror movie, the ghosts start out very small. They move forks, they steal spoons, they open doors, they pull covers. They're minor inconveniences until the climax of the story, when they just get mad that their little inconveniences have not inconvenienced you enough to leave, and then they bring out the big scares. It might not be logical. Like I said, if I was a ghost, I would start with the big scares and get the people out of my house and not wait around. But in story structure, you need to build. You can't start at the top and go down. Well, you can if you have a prologue. But if you have a prologue, you need to go all the way back down so you can build your structure again. In horror, as we all know, horror is built on moments of horror, of fear, of scares. The thing to remember about horror is you need to have beats between your scare beats. If you don't, your reader gets numb. There's only so much tension you can have before the tension goes away. And you become numb to the situation. Think about the year 2020. If you think about 2020 as a horror movie, go with me here. Back 75 years ago when it was January and all these things started happening and news would come of different things every day and we would get scared, and you'd see people on the internet, they would be scared, they would be tense, they would be like feeling the tension of the story. If 2020 was a story, they would be feeling the tension, and you can kind of relate to that as well. As each month went, we got, you've seen the things on Facebook where it's like your 2020 bingo card. Who had this on their bingo card? We had the virus, we had the murder hornets, we had everything else being thrown in, tornadoes, weather, everything thrown together, that by July, we're just kind of, if you see people on Facebook, they're just like, if something else happens, they're just like, okay, it's happened. The tension is pretty much gone because there's been so much tension. You can only have so much tension before you turn numb. In a story, you do not want your reader to become numb, especially if it's a ghost story or a horror story. You need to have beats in between your scares to get them feeling calm, to get them feeling put back in the story, to get relaxed, to get them feeling relaxed. I don't know about you, but 2020, I've not felt very relaxed. The difference in a horror book and 2020 is you can shut the page or shut the book on a horror book. A reader can stop reading your book. We can't get out of 2020. We're just kind of stuck here. So being numb or the tension leveling out just kind of happened. But in your horror book, you do not want your reader to close the book. That is the last thing you want. So make sure to put your beats between your beats. You can have humor, you can have romance, you can have sibling rivalries, you can have whatever you need to have to break up the scary parts. So I know the curve looks more like this on rising scares. Let's say this is scares. And the tension rises, okay? This needs to be more of a peak and valley situation, only it's going upward as a peak and valley. You've got to have the middle beats for your big moments to be impactful. And you need those moments to keep the readers reading, not grow numb, and not shut your book. Now, we're going to talk about the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. A lot of times in horror books, this happens very, 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 very close to the end of the book. You have the majority of a horror book is spent building up the action, building up the tension, building up the situation, building up the scares. Then you get to the climax. The climax is generally, of course, as we know, the act 3 of your book. In horror, a lot of times it's a very short act, very short. You have the climax, you get the resolution, and then, or you had the climax, the fallen action, and the resolution. A lot of times that can be in 10, 20, 50 pages in a book. One of my favorite channels is Dead Meat. We've talked about this. In Dead Meat, James A. Janice, who is the host, he talks about the kills in all the horror movies. This week, he did Wrong Turn 5. He's also done the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They both end about the same way. In the climax of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and basically Wrong Turn 5, the main character, our final girl, gets away. They get taken in a truck and they go away laughing, just happy to get out. The climax, the fall in action, and the resolution has happened in probably 1 to 2 minutes of screen time. In a book, your climax can happen, and then you can see how your characters reacted to it afterwards. I like to have at least 1 to 2 scenes afterwards to kind of show that the characters, what happened to them, if they're okay, what happened to the ghost, if anything happened to the ghost, and things like that. If you think about the movie The Birds, there actually is no resolution. They have the climax scene where the birds are all in the house. Then you have the falling action, which kind of actually seems like it's raising tensions too, with the birds sitting outside and they're going to the car. The people are going to the car, and then they drive through the birds to get out of Bodega Bay. That is a climax, fall in action, resolution, basically right then too, and it's very short. In horror, there are a few things to remember. Number 1, don't have your climax too early, because if you do, your readers won't know why they need to keep reading. They will be expecting another climax, and if you don't give them that, they're going to be disappointed in your book. You don't want to do that. You also don't want to do your climax too late. You don't want to end on your climax in the book there. Don't resolve anything, and then people are going to be ticked. At least have a little bit of a fall in action and a resolution at the end of your book, even if it's not very long. You can also have something called an "or is it" trope at the end of your book. That's where you think everything is settled, you think everything is okay, and then the very last scene, the very last sentence, the reader finds out, oh, things might not be right. I did that in Trinity Row, just so you know. Alright guys, that is the basic story structure of horror. That's the basic story structure of writing, essentially. What are your questions about how to write horror? Did I answer any of them? Did I ramble? Did you know everything I was talking about? Which is fine if you did. Leave a comment. Let's chat about it. Again, I want to thank Robert for having me on Wordstock this month. I appreciate it. I have loved digging into horror tropes and horror story structure and things like that. I'm a big nerd, and it was so cool to actually get into it. If you thought this video was anyway likable, please hit the like button. Please like this video if you like videos on writing, on reading, on horror, on anything like that. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday. If you want more day-to-day things about my writing journey, you can follow me on Instagram at Kelly Martin Author, or you can join my newsletter on my website at kellymartinbooks.com. I cannot wait to chat with you in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.